morning's scripture reading is from the book of Luke, chapter 1, verses 5 through 25 from the Message. During the rule of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest assigned to service in the regiment of Abijah. His name was Zachariah. His wife was descended from the daughters of Aaron. Her name was Elizabeth. Together they lived honorably before God, careful in keeping the ways of the commandments and enjoying a clear conscience before God. But they were childless because Elizabeth could never conceive, and now they were quite old. It so happened that as Zachariah was carrying out his priestly duties before God, working the shift assigned to his regiment, it came his one turn in life to enter the sanctuary of God and burn incense. The congregation was gathered and praying outside the temple, and at the hour of the incense offering, unannounced, an angel of God appeared just to the right of the altar of incense. Zachariah was paralyzed in fear, but the angel reassured him. "Don't fear, Zachariah. Your prayer has been heard. Elizabeth, your wife, will bear a son by you. You are to name him John. You are going to leap like a gazelle for joy, and not only you, many will delight in his birth." Excuse me. "He'll achieve great stature with God. He'll drink neither wine nor beer. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit from the moment he leaves his mother's womb. He will turn many sons and daughters of Israel back to their God. He will herald God's arrival in the style and strength of Elijah, soften the hearts of parents to children, and kindle devout understanding among hardened skeptics. He'll get the people ready for God." Zachariah said to the angel, "Do you expect me to believe this? I'm an old man and my wife is an old woman." But the angel said, "I am Gabriel, the sentinel of God, and sent especially to bring you this glad news. But because you don't believe me, you'll be unable to say a word until the day of your son's birth. Every word I've spoken to you will come true on time, God's time." Meanwhile, the congregation waiting for Zachariah was getting restless, wondering what was keeping him so long in the sanctuary. When he came out and couldn't speak, they knew he had seen a vision. He continued speechless and had to use sign language with the people. When the course of his priestly assignment was completed, he went back home. It wasn't long before his wife Elizabeth conceived. She went off by herself for 5 months, relishing in her pregnancy. "So this is how God acts to remedy my unfortunate condition," she said. May God add the blessing to the reading, hearing, and living of these words. Amen.
Thank you, Kim. We begin this morning. I want to take just a second to say that today happens to be my wife Joanne's birthday, and it's one of those birthdays that's, divisible by 10. Well, I mean, they're all divisible by 10, but, like one without a remainder. And she told me I was not allowed to throw a big party today, but she never said I couldn't say happy birthday over the interwebs. So, she's with our daughter in Orland Park for a cheer competition today. But happy birthday, honey. A few weeks back, I was in October, I was in Maine on a trip with my mom. And the best part of that trip was being at the Acadia National Park. If you've ever been, it's a gorgeous place. It's very popular. It was like the tour guide said it was that day we were there in October. It looked like the crowds were there in July. It's very, very popular. But because we were there as part of a tour group, we were able to get up to the top of Mount Cadillac. That's the highest point there at the park. It was spectacular. Now, I've been on higher mountains, I've been to Colorado, I've been to a lot of beautiful places, but there was something about that day, that moment, and I did the best I could with the, this phone is probably the best camera I've ever had, and I look at these photos that I took, and I really wish I had the ability these days to show you that photo on the big screen, but, at home, you can see it, right? There you go. There's something. Did we climb up? Well, I got to climb around on the rocks like a little mountain goat because that's fun. But there's something about having been there and trying to describe how it felt, and words just don't do it justice. That's great. That's why I've got this. I'll take a photo, and somehow I look at those photos of being up there, and I still think, even this photo doesn't capture the full beauty of the moment. Now, I can tell you some facts about it. I can tell you that Mount Cadillac is like 1,500 feet above sea level, which isn't all that much compared to, say, Pikes Peak or something, but it's the tallest point in the North Atlantic. Or one guy said it's the tallest point on the Atlantic north of Rio de Janeiro. And it was a beautiful day. It was cool. Some sun, just enough clouds to make it interesting, and you could see for miles that it was gorgeous. And yet, even the photo fails to fully put into words, fails to fully capture the experience of being there. You had a time like that where you just couldn't quite put into words what you were feeling and what you were experiencing. Maybe it's a night under the stars where you had that moment where you're somehow both feeling infinitesimally small and yet also part of this amazing, gorgeous, never-ending universe. Maybe it's when somebody asks you to, put into words your love for your spouse or for your children or for your grandchildren or something and you can't quite capture it no matter how hard you try. Have you had a moment like that? I suspect something like that is going on for the author of the Gospel of Luke. For all of our Gospel authors, of course. But today we're focusing on Luke. Something has happened. The author of the Gospel of Luke, we'll call him Luke, just for ease of... just because it's easier. Luke had an experience of God. Somehow, Luke, through hearing the stories of Jesus, had an experience with God. Something new was going on, and Luke was trying his best to put that into words. And I suspect he struggled to know. So what do? You turn to something familiar. You turn, perhaps, to words you've heard. You borrow some words that somebody else has offered. It's say it's 1950, early 1950s, and you want to tell a story about star-crossed lovers. Well, where do you turn for that story? Well, you turn to the story that gave us the very term star-crossed lovers, right? You turn to Romeo and Juliet, but you take that story and nobody knows what a Capulet is anymore, and so you name the families Jets and Sharks, because that sounds like a sports ball contest, and you know that's something that people will pay attention to, right? And instead of names that sound old-fashioned, you give them names like Tony and Maria, and now it feels familiar. You take a story that's been told for literally centuries, and you update it for that time, and you use that story to say something about the gentrification that's happening in your neighborhood in New York. Or a couple years later, maybe in 2021, you take that story again, and you update it again, only this time you have something to say about how the cycle of violence seems to never end. And so you change the ending a little bit if you're Steven Spielberg, and you put the words in the mouths of the women. Because it seems like we men have failed pretty spectacularly to end the cycle of violence. And maybe if we give the women a chance, they could do that. When you don't know how to for sure say a thing, you turn to stories that you've heard and make it your own. I suspect something like that is happening for Luke and his community. They've had this incredible experience of God that somehow, in knowing the story of Jesus, has shown them a vision of the invisible God. That they said, in Jesus, we've met the one who shows us what God is like. And that God is unlike any other story we've heard. Well, maybe except for one. Luke is saying, we are convinced that God is doing a new thing in Jesus. Do we have any stories about God doing a new thing? Oh, hey, yes. Remember that one story that we've heard over and over again about Abraham and Sarah? God called them to a new place and did a new thing. What was special about them? Well, they were promised a whole lot of kids, and suddenly they were 75 years old, and they didn't have them yet. And then, like, the story flips, and it's 25 years later, and they still don't have kids. And somehow, God makes a way out of that no way. Somehow, life comes out of that spot that was barren, a place where there had been no life. Life suddenly emerges. That's a story that I think Luke could use. So Luke turned to a story that was familiar, that his audience would know, that his community would know. That story of Abraham and Sarah, of God making a way out of no way. And he says, hey, how do we tell this story about Jesus? How do we tell the story of a God that makes way out of no way? Well, did you hear about Zachariah and Elizabeth? They've been faithfully following God their whole lives, but they have not been able to have children. Now we know, friends, that in society then, and frankly, way still too much now, the main value that women had was to do what? Have children. Still way too many folks around the world and in our country that still feel that way about our women, but that's a conversation for another day. For today, I want to focus on this idea of imagine what it's like to be Elizabeth in that situation. Society tells her she has one job, and she has not been able to do it. And of course, the science hasn't caught up with it, so the text says, well, it's her fault. We know better now. We know it's almost always this guy's fault. But the science hadn't caught up with that yet, so the text tells us it's her fault. She's the one that's barren. It has nothing to do with God. Right? She's living with this her whole life. But Luke says, no, this God that we've met in Jesus makes life where there has been no life. That life emerges even in places that seem barren. How do you tell the story? How do you begin to tell the story of the one who has changed everything for us? Well, it starts with Zachariah and Elizabeth. It starts with a couple who've done everything right, and yet it hasn't gone right for them. Until it does. See, here's the thing. Luke is used to, if Luke was written, we used to think about Luke as written maybe around year 80. Some have suggested maybe even as late as year 100, even a little later. So there's been some time to pass. Like we've talked about how the main issue that's facing the early church is whether and how to integrate Gentiles into this mostly Jewish movement. By the time Luke is written, that conversation has more or less been had. And we know now that everybody is invited. We read this just a couple weeks ago, remember? God shows no partiality. It does not matter from where you come. God will bring you in and make you part of the family. Luke's telling a story for everyone. When Matthew tells the story, he tells the story, the history of Jesus, and it stops. He takes it all the way back to Abraham, the beginning of the story of the people of God. But Luke says, hold on, I'll do you one better. This story doesn't go back just to Abraham. This lineage of Jesus, he's going to tell us in a couple chapters, it goes all the way back to Adam. Why? Because it includes everybody. Everybody's part of this story. Luke says, how do you tell a story about a new thing that includes everybody? Well, for one, you take the genealogy all the way back to the beginning, and to symbolize that, I suspect Luke knew, just like we know that it wasn't actually Adam, but that symbolic nature of God beginning a new thing with Adam. That's Luke's saying that's everybody. Everybody, every person ever is part of this story. And then what does he do? He introduces us to Zachariah. Now the story we're used to, the story that would have been told at the time, would have said, no, how do we tell our history? Well, we do it usually through kings and through wars. Am I right? You learn the history of a place, of a people, it's usually through kings and through wars. Well, the people of the Hebrew Scriptures will tell us the story maybe through Abraham, but Abraham kind of becomes a celebrity himself, right? I mean, we sing about him for goodness sakes, right? Father Abraham, and many sons have. Thank you. I mean, my goodness, apparently you guys have not spent enough time as children in church Bible camps, so we're going to have to sing these songs. We're going to have to, King of Kings and Lord of Lords last week seemed pretty unfamiliar. We've got some work to do. But that's okay. We'll get there. Abraham gets this. He's the father of three, not one, not two, but three world religions. Abraham's kind of a star. Zachariah's nobody. Zachariah's more to the point. Everybody. What's Zachariah doing when we meet him in this story? He's getting up and going to work. That's it. He's just a dude that goes to work every day. That's all we get from Zachariah. How do you tell the story? Luke's challenge is, how do I tell this story? How do I begin a story that's going to include everybody? That says God's doing a new thing. Well, we take it back to the very beginning, and the first person we meet is just a dude who goes to work every day. He heads off to work. Elizabeth stays at home and takes care of the kids. Oh, wait. No, Elizabeth's left at home to stew in those juices of regret, of being left behind, of feeling like she missed her only calling in the world. Isn't that a story that can connect to so many of us? You get up, you go to work, but sometimes you blink and you look around and it feels like the world has left you behind. Luke, by telling the story through Zachariah and Elizabeth, I believe is saying to you and to me and to each one of us, if that's you, if you're the type that gets up and goes to work and feels some days like you've been left behind, this story is for you. Now look, I don't have a real job. I was describing to my friend the other day, what do I do for work? Well, I talk at people for 20 minutes and make Star Wars jokes and Hamilton references. I'm like John Adams. I don't have a real job anyway. But those of you that do, those of you that get up and go to work every single day faithfully, you know Zachariah, because he's you. Luke's challenge is to tell a story that includes everybody. And so he starts with what we might today call the trope of an everyman. How do you tell a story of a God who makes way out of no way? How do you tell the story of a God who brings life where there's been no life? You do it with characters who've had to wait and wait and wait and feel like they've missed out. Now, all week long, I've been scratching my head trying to come up with an analogous situation for our congregation about something we might possibly be waiting for. And so I want to take a second to share about Ridge Road. Because my understanding is that some of us are wondering, what is going on? I have to think at some point, Elizabeth said to God, what is going on? Where's this new thing that I always thought was important? So, I want to share just a couple of things about what's going on, and I want to get it right. Why are we not at Ridge Road yet? In there yet? Well, because we don't have occupancy for it yet. And why is that? Well, the main thing still has to do with our fire alarm system. To get work done requires all the parts to be in, and not all the parts are in. Why is that? I don't know. Ask the global supply chain. In the year of our Lord, 2023, not every work goes smoothly. I suspect that's probably been the case for every year, but it's especially true this year. Right? So we're still waiting on some work to be done there. Because one of our values is that we are a safe place for everybody, and we literally want our bodies to be safe in that place. We will not be allowed to be in there, and we shouldn't want to be in there until it's safe and the fire alarm system is complete. One of our values is that the building should be safe for every person. It should be a safe place. And most of the time, these days, when we talk about that, we mean that emotionally, but we need it to be physically true as well. That it's open, our doors are open for everyone. And so one of our requirements is to be ADA compliant. And that's important because we need to be a safe place for everybody. And so there's a little delay in working on that. Global supply chain and getting the lift that will allow access to the stage is still in process. And like anybody that's ever done any construction on anything, anywhere, there are some little items that need to be done still. We've got a checklist of things. Not stuff that will keep us from being in there. Not stuff that's, completely safety-oriented like those two biggies. But things like, we want the door on the bathrooms to close properly. We want the media center to be complete. Yeah, that's kind of an important deal, right? That's kind of a thing that we want, right? There's a couple of lights on the outside that need to be worked on. So that's what it is. It's not that there's no global conspiracy, unless there is. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. There's no global conspiracy. It's just that the village needs to do their job, and we're doing all that we can from our end to push our contractors and our general contractor to say, hey, get this work done. And there's only so much that we can do, but we are doing all that we can. And we have really, really good, dedicated, talented folks helping to make that happen, doing everything we can from our end. Val, Bob, Claude, and the whole group of building folks and trustee folks. There's a big team working on that. So why are we waiting? Well, because sometimes we have to wait a little bit. But that just makes us even more part of this story. Part of this story that says God is making a way where there seems to be no way. Part of the story that says God is doing a new thing. A new thing is brewing, is building. And God is waiting, working to break through. It happened for Zachariah and Elizabeth. It will happen for us. Friends, if you've ever felt like you had to wait, if you ever felt like the world had passed you by, if you ever felt like you had missed out, this story was written for you. Because the God that we meet in Jesus says everybody belongs. And if you can hold on a little longer, God's going to break through, and an amazing new thing will come to pass. Hold on and don't let go. God is with us in this